we've been kind of in this phase that we've been in has been bringing in like the eclipse portals and the eclipse phase and, you know, kind of 11/11 portal and blah, 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 all that stuff has really been just really deconstructing all this energy architecture within ourselves and kind of collectively in society. And we've been feeling that those shifts in different ways, depending on how much of that has been close in to us or not. And that's been both destabilizing and delightful, sometimes at the same time, sometimes in kind of a quick sort of, you know, oh no, destabilizing, oh yeah, awesome, right? Like it's been a very kind of a interesting experience. And then and we've had this, like, the energy has been accelerating, and that's been happening all year, right? It was been happening for, I want to say, for like the last two and a half years or so. The energies have been accelerating at increasingly faster rates of acceleration, if that makes sense. So if you were looking at like a graph of what's going on with the energy acceleration, it would be like, you know, kind of go doing this. And that rate of acceleration has all these impacts on us, right? It has the biological impacts. Like our biology needs to kind of catch up and integrate and kind of attune, because it wants to entrain to this sort of faster rate, and which is correct, right? Like, and the energy is bringing us up on purpose. And, you know, same for Earth, of course. But also the energy is essentially, as it's spinning faster and faster. I think the visual that's useful is if you think of like a centrifugal force, where if you're spinning something fast enough, things will start flying off of it, right? And like that's, I feel like that's a lot of the kind of like clearing effect of what's going on, is that, and then sometimes our energy architecture inside is a little bit not porous enough to allow, as that stuff is spinning out and off, and it's sort of spinning out, off, spinning out, off, spinning out, off, like if you were spinning like a hand mixer beater thing that you would use to like mix something up in a bowl, and you picked it up and you were holding it and it was still spinning, all the batter would go flying everywhere. But if you had like kind of a like sort of channels or like layers around that, it would only spin out as far as that is. And so some of our inner energy architecture, the channels are not porous enough for that kind of density to get out for some of us. And so then when the density doesn't quite fully get out, then we have these physical experiences that we don't enjoy, let's say, right? And so like for me, personally, what's been going on has been sort of working, and this refers back to the apex timeline phenomenon, right? And so the apex timeline phenomenon, remembering, is when your human is moving into the leadership role for your cosmic self, for all of your cosmic self's lives. And so it's sort of like in that apex where it's doing the work, being in the lead role for whatever the cosmic self is working through. And so that's been true for me for a while now. And this new work for me to be doing in my human, for all of me, has been related to some very kind of, if you will, early experiences. And I use early kind of in air quotes because that makes it time as a line, but time as a sphere. And so early in time as a sphere is kind of like the versions of lives and experiences that in that sort of bubble of experience, there's only a lesser amount of experiences kind of in the awareness of that version of self. Whereas like old, would have had like many of them. I hope that makes sense. That might have made it worse, but it's okay. If you didn't follow it, ignore it, right? Like always just like take what's useful, let it go, what's not. So so there's been a couple of those that have been kind of related. And in one of them, there was like, you know, just like a kind of a big fuck up on my part, right? And so kind of like working through that and like what's going on with that. And then in the other, like essentially just having to come face to face with like the inner monster, like a horror show of like an experience of just like, I don't think I can deal with the idea that I did that, but also I totally get that that's, and so that's been relevant. And we've been speaking earlier, in the month about, or before, about kind of cult energy clearings and other kinds of things clearing, and clearing around where, and how to clear around where we've kind of consented or come into agreement with mentors who've taken and then kind of abused our own magic or our power in various ways, and clearing on that level. This is kind of a different sort of like an inner, like, right, like sort of confronting the inner monster. And for me, this has really been revealing to me the places within my kind of energy architecture and my human where those sort of channels aren't porous enough to what I was just describing. And so then my body is giving me these little messages around like, where is the energy still stuck, right? And it's primarily on my left side, which has been sort of interesting. And I've never been particularly focused on or really interested in the, hundreds of different ways in which people interpret or decide what left versus right side of body, means or is doing. And it's like, which one is feminine or masculine or this or that, the other thing. But one thing that I did hear recently that I found interesting from a friend was that in certain perspectives, the left side is about things from the past. And I was like, oh, that does kind of fit with this. So this left side kind of difficulty in the physical, which has been moving around, right? So there's certain ways in which it's localized, but even within the localization, it's moving around, right? And which is, I feel for me, the reason that occurs is to give my body's just basically giving me the data of here's kind of where, loosely in quotes, energy is stuck. And it's not at all about like, oh, and now you need to find a physical therapist who can work with that, like particular, it's not like that might be useful. I'm not saying that there aren't things in the physical that couldn't be useful, but for me, the moving it around is to make me fully, clearly aware, particularly for my nervous system, to be fully, clearly aware this is a purely energetic thing that's occurring. And the work to be done is really at the energetic level. And so this kind of working with going into where these energies may be showing up for you. And really what I have found to be the most powerful experience was to come into, first I started to just like, I started hearing like, let's move this down into earth, that like that these energies have a greater density and they're not comfortable in this kind of faster, moving energy space that I'm becoming, that we're all becoming, but that in earth they can be more comfortable, right? That there's this sort of like, you can kind of go to bed and go to sleep there, right? And then I sort of played with the idea of, could I send them back to the beginning? Like, do they want to have like the do-over energy? Like, you can go back to the light, you can go back to infinity, you can start over. And some of them did, and some of them were just like, no, we just want to, like, we like the idea of snuggling into earth. That sounds really good, but they move really slowly. So they're like these little snails. And I'm like, come on, let's go down. It's okay, you can go down. And then as I was working with them, that brought me into like really just loving them, like how adorable, this like, oh, they're just moving really slowly, like that's what's happening. And it's sort of like little slug energy, like, okay, you keep going, it's all right, which is very different than how I've worked with it before, where I've kind of tried to sort of dissolve it quickly or sort of transmute it quickly, which also is often possible and often is effective, sometimes might feel more desirable, but actually in this nuance, feeling that there can be a skipping of steps when we try to do that. And so when we try to do that and it doesn't work, there can be many reasons why it's not working, but one of them could be that we're skipping a step. And so for me, the step in this experience that may be relevant for you, may not be, is like just the kind of coming into really seeing and really just being able to love, even if I couldn't see, but to just be able to kind of love and love the pace and just let those energies do what they need to do. And then as there's more kind of room within, because they're moving through, right? Doing upgrades within kind of the energy channels within. So first, bringing in this higher light, bringing that intentionally more and more into the inner space, inner energies, and then this kind of upgrading of that, kind of how that energy architecture is working to be more kind of, there's a lot of kind of air and water energies that I don't know how else to describe, but that are relevant for this. And just bringing in that more and more of my energy architecture is becoming less solid, less earthly, less matter, more matter is a tricky word, but like less solid and more kind of air and water based. And that this allows that kind of centrifugal clearing to be able to happen more effectively, more efficiently as we go. And then the sensation very clearly that I've described in earlier shares of this kind of 22nd, 23rd of November has this, like, we pop up and through, right? And so it's sort of felt like we're going to sort of like be popped out of a cannonball kind of vibe. It's kind of the feeling. Now, I think everybody's going to have their own experience of that. And some people may have like a visceral moment of feeling like bloop, they popped up and out or got shot out of the cannonball or whatever. For others, it may be more subtle and it may just sort of feel like a kind of like a lightning, like a kind of, ooh, that feels better. Like somehow I feel kind of like I can breathe a little bit more easily and the air energetically feels clearer and I feel kind of lighter in some way, or I feel like I can move a little bit more easily, as if I had like 5-pound weights tied around my ankles and was walking around and suddenly they went away and I'm like, you know, or like when you were a kid and you got your first pair of like fancy sneakers and you were like, I could jump over a building with these sneakers, you know, like that. And, so I do definitely still continue to feel like that's coming. I keep getting the visual as I talk about it right now of like being in a plane and you're like up going and you've taken off and you're rising up in your altitude and you're rising up in your altitude. And you can sort of see all of sort of the landscape and the city that you're leaving. And, you know, maybe you're able to see waters nearby and mountains and things like that. And you're kind of coming, you see the clouds up above, but that moment of like, you go into the clouds and when you come up the clouds on the other side, and it's like you're up and out in this blue sky, sunny thing that down on the ground, it was cloudy, you know, but you're just like that sensation of when you pop right up out of the clouds for the first time. Not that it's our first time having that, but that's what's imagery wise is coming through for me today about this experience of the 22nd, 23rd. And I'm kind of lumping those together because of where people are on the planet, but also I think people's sort of timings on these things are, you know, it's not like going to be an exact thing for everybody. And I don't want people to be attached to this, like, oh, I missed the thing. Like, that's not what's happening. The energies keep accelerating. And that's like, hi, just new normal. The energy is just going to keep accelerating, like for the foreseeable future. And more and more, we're going to find, I think, this sort of interesting sort of vacillation between all I really want is sunlight and like energy and certain like light biology supports for my body, but then having momentary like, and now I have to eat everything in the kitchen, particularly if it's like root vegetables or like really earthy kinds of, you know, stew or whatever those kinds of things are. And that's just that kind of, big grounding needed, right? So just keep on letting yourself be wherever you need to be and allow whatever vacillations in that regard that are occurring. I do think solstice is just going to be this incredible experience. I just feel it all the time. I feel like I'm in it often now. Even though right now has felt like this kind of kaleidoscope of timelines where it's sort of like one moment I'm experiencing things from this timeline and then bloop, and then it's another timeline and then boop, it's another timeline. And they're not even really so much sort of shuffling in and out, you know, in that kind of like the way at the eye doctor when they do the little like this one and then this one and then this one and then this one, right? And they're showing, and you have like different sort of blurry or sharper. It's not so much like that. It's more like they're kind of all at once. And I can sometimes identify like, oh, look, that like cool little panel, you know, in the kaleidoscope, that's solstice, you know, then it keeps popping up bigger. I don't know. But there's definitely like kind of a new sensation of shifting into kind of a new longer term energy as well, which I think is why this early interest in the 2023 planetary energy theme has been coming up for me. So before, usually I kind of really have the clarity on that after solstice. So let's see. The other thing that was really really relevant earlier today, I was actually speaking with someone. This was really useful for them as the energies are going faster and faster and faster, there can be this kind of feeling of like, okay, it's buckle up, buttercup, and it's the roller coaster ride, and like feeling kind of the G-forces, that all of that, like that's true. And at the same time, look at, are you having that experience from a place of like, woohoo? Or if there's a kind of a like, ooh, I gotta like buckle up. Go back to the fear chair episode where I talked about the movie Contact, because that's actually like your cue. If the sort of like vibe of like, that's a little, I'm in the strap in, buckle up, if there's a little of that, that's kind of your cue of like, oh, wait, actually unbuckle, let go of all of the buckles, let go of all of the straps, and just like allow the floating to occur, and allow yourself to be in the zero G versus like the G force of we're going. For some of us, we have phases where we really love that feeling of the acceleration and the G force. And so like, that's why the thing to feel into is, am I really loving that? Or is it kind of creating actually more stress than I really want? And you can play with that moment to moment as well, right? Yeah. New timelines are also being created really fast right now. And so if you're having a sense of, I'm not 100% sure how to land on XYZ thing that I'm working on, just give it a little more, like see what happens when you get out the other side of this like current little being popped out of the cannonball, popping up above the clouds vibe this week, and sort of see where you're at on the other side of that in a few days. And if things feel a little more clear, they may feel completely clear, where you've been sort of not sure about that, then things may coalesce. If you're feeling a difficulty kind of attaching to a timeline, then that may be on purpose, and allow yourself to just kind of be like, okay, I'm in super floaty because these new high timelines are being constructed by me at this time. And, I'm not ready to kind of dock into it yet. Yeah. And just to continue to really attend to the tending of your radiance. Like nothing could be more important. What lights you up? What supports your radiance? What allows it to keep being bigger? What allows you to shift and continue to refine your life design so that your radiance is at the center of that, instead of like off in a corner that gets like an after effect, right? That's really, that's what's happening. And where people are doing that and kind of committing into that shift, which can be a massive paradigm shift for some, then they're getting some really cool, beautiful expansions very quickly, very powerfully. Yeah. Okay. And then the kind of the last thing is to just sort of more of a reminder a little bit. I think I've spoken about this before, but a little bit of a reminder around what are the drivers within you around being in service to others. And remember the kind of the idea of there being sort of these different horizontal layers or bands of kind of the core motivations or drivers behind being in service to others. And that the highest potency, the highest efficacy, the highest impact level of the gift of your service actually is available when you stop having that be your driver for being in service. That being in service is just a byproduct of you really just expressing, being the embodied expression of yourself, of your beingness as a unique individual expression of the deep sacred current of life force. And the more you're really kind of just expressing that through whatever means feel correct to you, right? That kind of create, transmit thing that I talk about a lot, whatever feels right for the kind of transmit and the create, but particularly the putting it out there, when that's being done for its own sake, for the beingness of it, for it as an expression of your beingness, then the potency of that gift is a byproduct, and it is radically greater than when the gift is being done from like that's the core driver. This can be especially difficult for people who are very kind of helper driven, and really desiring to be in helping mode, whether it's helping an individual, helping the planet, helping society, it doesn't matter. And I'm not saying that it isn't good to want to be a helper. It's really about understanding where, as we're in this evolutionary journey, how do I step into the larger sense of scale of my own power, my own potential that I have always had this sense of within myself that I'm not quite yet seeing out in the world. I got to pop up and out of this service model into this beingness model for its own sake. Yeah. And just a reminder that like through those horizontal bands or layers of service to others, there's this kind of vertical channel of service to self. And so there's this back and forth of we've got to kind of be doing both as we're sort of moving up kind of through the different layers. But we also, when we sort of pop out, we're not doing service to self either. We're just being. And then there's kind of the open question that I think is very fun to explore is, what is the action of being? And I think that's actually a really fun thing to start to feel into in this journey, because we are embodied into and bringing in, as we evolve into Homo lumens, this physical experience. And it's a doing experience. It's a linear time moving forward experience. So what is the doing? What is the action? What is the activity of beingness for us individually each? Because our beingness is individually unique as well. And I was somewhere recently in a little gathering, and somebody was sharing about they were sort of like feeling like they were as they were sharing, they were talking about essentially sort of like wanting to just be in the beingness of themselves, but feeling like that was too passive. And so as a result, they were kind of listing the sort of actions. And the energy was like, it's not passive. Like really going into the full beingness, like is probably actually the most active thing you can do if you're really doing it. And, or I should say, being it. So this is to kind of drive you crazy with the words, but yeah, I do think that's going to be a really important sub theme in the kind of the homecoming theme, actually, is this, what is the doingness of beingness? Sometimes it's just the words just make you kind of laugh. But I think it's a really, as much as I'm being silly about it, it's actually a really important, powerful focus area or devotional area. So I think that's going to be really, really fun and important to be thinking about as we go forward.